This week in the chamber, we're talking extraterrestrials, aliens, a discussion of aliens in pop culture and what they represented, why aliens tend to make popular video game fare, playing a character in your favorite universe, and what happens when aliens are, common people just trying to live their lives. All this and more on this episode of Phantom Roulette. Alright. Wow, it feels so weird to be back here in this space. Hi everyone, welcome back to Phantom Roulette. My name is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
So I wanted to start off by saying welcome back everyone. My month of December was an absolute crazy times.
Yeah, I heard you talk to Santa very specifically.
Yeah, I did. I was like, hey Santa. I was working for him and I had to wear like this green suit. It was horrible. And I apologize in advance because I'm not 100% sure what my audio quality is going to be like because I have a teensy bit of a head cold. So I'm recording on my own personal laptop and I might sound a tad bit stuffy. So I'm going to apologize in advance about that. So Cody, what's some nerdy stuff that you've been up to as of late?
Well, a couple different things, but I think the big one right now is I picked back up Persona 5, which has just been an absolute delight.
Okay.
And people who have a PS4 and really enjoy anime / JRPGs, this is definitely a pickup.
I'm familiar with those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you, Joe? What have you been up to?
Are you ready for a shocking twist? Get your weird soundboard ready because I've been playing Bastion.
Whoa, you're playing video games now?
Yeah, I'm playing video games. I bought Bastion Empire on the Steam sale.
Nice.
And I've been playing Bastion, and I've been loving it because it's just such a cool game. It's like top-tier world building, and the weapons are super-duper fun to play with. But yeah, that's sort of been what I've been devoting a lot of my nerdy time to, that and trying to finish up Star Trek The Next Generation. But yeah.
Nice.
Speaking of Star Trek The Next Generation, what a fun segue into this week's topic. So yeah, one of the things that like I've kind of been interested in lately, and I don't know where exactly this came from, is just kind of like looking into like aliens in pop culture. Probably because of how much I've been spending time in Star Trek universe specifically. And of course, there was this like movie that came out a little bit ago. You might have heard of it, called like The Last Jedi.
Which is amazing, by the way.
Oh my god, it was so good.
Oh, I loved it.
I was worried that we were gonna have no.
We're I mean, it is a very controversial movie.
It is, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah, like I have everyone on all sides. I've got people who loved it. I got people who hated it and just would not let me enjoy the movie for what it was. Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's one of those deals where people got angry at The Last Jedi because it was playing it too safe. It was like, it's just Star Wars: A New Hope all over again. And this one did stuff that was radically different, and then people got really angry about that, so it's like, well, so what do you want? And I guess what they want was Rogue One, but that's another story for another day. I was recently reminded of like a Disney attraction that came out in the 90s called like Alien Extraterrestrial like Activities. Ooh. That was apparently so controversial it got closed after like less than a decade of being opened because it was very, very scary. And then like there's other things too, because you have aliens kind of have been popping up in media for a very, very long time. And I think it's kind of interesting because they almost always represent something different in no matter what the media. And I'm sure everyone's like, wow, Joe, what a good hot take that you just had right there. But I mean, like, aliens have been showing up for a very, very long time. As early as, like, there's evidence that people might suggest that there are aliens in early Japanese stories from the 1001 Arabian Nights and things like that. But, I mean, I guess they're kind of linked to science fiction, and specifically the works of people like, H.G. Wells and things like that, The War of the Worlds being one of the biggest ones. But, they also pop up in actual quote-unquote history, depending on what kind of person you are. I think the most famous example of this is Roswell, New Mexico. I want to believe.
I know, yeah, sure. And so Roswell, New Mexico was a tiny little town in New Mexico, obviously. So the American Southwest. It's located near the middle of a big old desert, and there wasn't a lot going on out there, except that there was an Air Force base that was, from the looks of it, at one time it was a prisoner of war camp for a little bit, all these different things. But afterwards, the base more or less became locked down, which, makes sense for military bases. Some have restricted access, things like that. And in the 60s, it was suggested that people saw unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, flying in the skies around New Mexico, crash landing, and then the government runs out, takes these spaceships, takes them back into Roswell, New Mexico. They've discovered aliens, but they're keeping it a secret from the American people and running all kinds of tests on their aliens and spaceships. So that's the framework, right?
Okay.
And, there are other stories, too, of, people discovering out in the desert, like, weird ships that, you open them up and there was guys in weird suits and things like that. And a lot of people argue that this is kind of where the birth of the quote-unquote little gray men aliens come from.
Okay.
Which I think is, like, one of our most, like, popular depictions of aliens. So, they're like, they have the short little limbs, they have the big, oval gray heads with the big black eyes that, like, cover almost, like, 3/4 of their face. They don't speak a lot, things like that. But I think it's important to note that, like, once again, aliens kind of are filling a role in our country's fear and our country's desires, if you will. So, what's going on in the 60s, Cody?
What's going on in the 60s? Gosh,
yeah.
I don't know.
There's a big one.
I know, and I'm spacing on it right now.
It's
I should
okay.
know this.
We were in a little conflict that was called the Cold War.
Oh, that's it. That's the thing. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot.
No. It's cool, because there's lots of stuff going on in the 60s, and to be fair, the Cold War had been going on for a little while, but the idea of the Cold War is you have these two superpowers, both of which have an immense amount of power. They have immense amounts of money, and to a certain degree an immense amounts of secrecy and secret tactics. And so let's just throw another layer on there. Now we're going to throw into the mix an alien species that is powerful, is visiting us, and isn't quite doing anything about it. So, aliens in this context almost have sort of like a Cold War Russia feel to them.
Okay.
I don't know, are you buying that?
I mean, yeah. Granted, my alien stuff comes from, I had a blow up alien, like the gray man, as a kid. I watched X-Files and stuff like that. So, like, a lot of what you're saying kind of is more or less the plot of, if spoilers for X-Files, though you've had a long time to watch it. Yeah. It's kind of the general plot of X-Files, is there's these, there's the Russians and the Americans, and then you have this alien race, and you don't know what they want, who they're working for, or if they're working for anybody. So, yeah, no, it drives in my book.
Now, so here's the interesting thing. And, over the years, I don't actually know what the timetable on this is, but after a certain amount of time, stuff becomes declassified and given to the American people, top secret information. One of the things that's revealed about Roswell is that Roswell is an experimental site for new experimental aircrafts. So things like the B-52 bomber, or no, not B-52, goodness, the stealth bomber.
Okay.
Other experimental aircrafts. And so, what the story coming from the government is, well, we're testing out, supersonic jets, other kinds of, maybe like light manned aircrafts that like could go high and like get out of enemy radars, things like that. Suggestions of that they might not have been using humans the entire time, so like maybe it was like, chimps in suits and things like that. And so that these things people were seeing in and around Roswell, New Mexico, were just these experimental aircrafts, which to the average person would be an unidentified flying object, but in reality was, these secret jets that we were using to win the war. And, there's stories about this everywhere of, various government sites throughout the United States popping up and taking experimental aircrafts, this, that, the other thing. And aliens in history start becoming pretty big. So big, in fact, that in the I believe 70s or 80s, I can look this up and make an official post about it somewhere else.
Sure.
There was a historian from, I believe, Germany or Belgium, who writes this now rather infamous book
called Chariots of the Gods, which is where basically it's the first time we sort of see evidence of ancient aliens in the historical dialogue.
Is that the same guy who was a meme? Who has
No.
crazy hair?
No, because this guy was working a little bit earlier than him, although he shows up on that show apparently. Okay. But that sort of began this new kind of like pop history concept of, well, what if ancient civilizations were aided by the aliens?
Well, yeah, don't some people argue that how could the Egyptians have built the pyramids with, what technology they had, and so they think that aliens came to help them, basically?
That's true, except that we now have evidence, and we've had recreations of how they've built the pyramids, including like archaeological and anthropological teams like recreating the methodology and stuff.
Right.
For how they did it. But no, it was probably just aliens, though, is the thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can make all those people who came up with, like, real legitimate ways that we could have made them, they're just hiding the truth.
They're just hiding the truth. Yeah, I have, as a person with a master's degree in history, I actually know where the aliens were. But, like, see, here's the thing, it's awkward. Now I have a sniper dot on my chest.
Oh, no.
Because I'm revealing the truth that I was told all the real history. They were like, no, you have to provide this fake history.
Abort.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Did they get you with that weird mouth bullet?
Oh, they did.
Oh,
I'm going to die now.
Oh, no. Guys...
Brian.
We blew it. We talked too much, and now Joe's gone.
I'm back.
Oh, God.
The aliens came and they saved me.
Oh, perfect.
They were like, Cody has another, 40 minutes of podcast to do. We're not going to leave him alone on this one.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. It, aliens. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I know. It was good on them. But yeah, I mean... So, one of the only reason I bring up Ancient Aliens is, I read a really interesting thing about it recently, which, it was in relation specifically to the Eastern Island heads.
Yeah.
And, in the translations of, the interviews and the works about the Eastern Island heads, one of the things that these people say is that the heads walked there. Huh. And so people are like, well, what does that mean? Weird mythology, blah, blah, blah. And a team of, once again, anthropologists, archaeologists, and things like that, they built a reproduction of the Easter Island heads. And what they discovered was that if you tied up ropes around its neck correctly, and you had, 1, 2, 3, left side pull, 1, 2, 3, right side pull, and you did this in a rhythm, it almost made it look like it was walking to its spot. Huh. And so there's sort of been accusations thrown at ancient astronaut theorists of kind of, suggesting and kind of upholding this Enlightenment ideal of history, which is how could non-European people achieve things like this? Well, clearly they had outside help. And, yeah, I mean... There's a certain thing to be said about that, I feel, because it's just kind of messed up to just say, well, these people couldn't do it on their own. Clearly there was aliens.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the big things that, when I heard about, the Egyptians couldn't build the pyramids, blah, 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 I was like, well, that's mean. I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of smart people who were capable of making a system in order to build them. Granted, there's a whole lot more going on there, but yeah, I think that the sentiment that people are getting at is kind of mean.
It is, yeah, it's a little messed up. And then there was also one of the best episodes ever of Ancient Aliens, where they literally just stole the plot of the Marvel movie Thor, and they presented it as history. Yeah, perfect. It was amazing. I was watching this episode, and I was starting to get real mad, because, I get real mad when I watch Ancient Aliens.
Sure.
And it was like, what if Odin's spear that never misses was actually a laser guided missile? And I was like, okay.
Well, I think you just came up with an idea for our new podcast where we take Marvel scripts and pretend that they're real, and that's how we discover aliens.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, I mean, that...
TM, don't take this from us. We want this.
Well, that's how the CIA was founded. It was founded by Computer Armanzola from the hit Marvel film, Marvel Captain America 2, The Winter Soldier, which is probably my favorite Captain America film. That's another conversation for another day.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that, though, but moving on.
But yeah, moving on. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of interesting because no matter when... So sometimes aliens exist just to kind of be, you know, cool. I would argue that that's kind of their role in, like, Star Wars. Sometimes they're, like, a terrifying, nameless other.
Okay.
And so, you know, you read, like, War of the Worlds, and it's a kind of nameless other that's coming to attack our world, things like that. You have that rather infamous example of Orson Welles doing the radio play. Have you heard about this?
Vaguely. I don't know the specifics, but do tell.
Yeah, it was Halloween night, and Orson Welles, you know, starts off with this whole thing about how we're going to be putting on a dramatic retelling of War of the Worlds, and it's going to be done like more or less like live action. So like in about 5 minutes, like we're gonna cut into it, and it's gonna be sort of done through like news stories and news flashes. It's all over the radio, so there's no visuals whatsoever. There's going to be realistic sound effects, this, that, the other thing. And it just so happens that everyone's sort of like favorite radio program, which the name of which I'm never going to remember, experiences technical difficulties. And so everyone's turning on this radio show anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes into the production.
Oh, this could only go so well.
Which is, so they don't hear this disclaimer that this is a radio play. It's going to sound realistic, but it's not realistic. It's not real. Like, aliens aren't invading. Except, you know, they turn it on, it's like, the aliens are coming across the bridge, blah, 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 blah. Like, they're coming into your, like, town, this, that, the other thing. And so, like, people were legitimately terrified. Like, apparently people were starting to run out into the streets. Like, people were grabbing guns and this, that, the other thing. They were arming themselves to get ready. And I believe Orson Welles gets sued for it.
Oof.
But I think he won because it's like, he said, like, I gave the disclaimer and everything. Another example of that, you know, aliens sort of being used as an example of, you know, a terrifying thing is, of course, the Twilight Zone. Like, there are very few, like, quote-unquote nice aliens on that show. The most famous example is The Monsters Are Coming on Maple Street, which is a really good episode of the Twilight Zone that's, like, you know, was aired in the 60s, so I'm going to spoil it, because, well, basically, let's just put it this way. It's very much like Cold War hysteria, where a small street starts turning against each other because they're convinced that everyone else is aliens, and there's a really interesting and clever twist. It is on Netflix. I would highly go and recommend watching it. But yeah, so this one's like a little bit more pop culture history. Just this idea that aliens have always kind of popped up, and they almost always represent something that we fear, with, I think, one of the most notable exceptions being Star Trek, where we more or less get along with all the aliens, with a few notable exceptions. Like, aliens in that world are usually better than us and are kind of like examples for us. So that's my little thing about history of aliens. What are we going to transition into now? Did I talk about some Vertigo games?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there are a literal metric F-ton of video games that have aliens in it, you know. I mean, but the one that I played recently being last year, was XCOM 2. And the XCOM series in general, which is, you know, kind of going along with your original point that the aliens in XCOM are just the fear of the unknown, the fear of these creatures taking over the world. And XCOM 2 actually puts a interesting twist on the game, because originally in the XCOM series, you are, you know, super, you know, black ops military unit designed to basically take out this alien threat and keep them from taking over the planet. And so most of the games kind of revolve around that concept. Like, you're building a base, you're building an army, and you're basically hunting down these aliens left and right in kind of a turn-based tactical, you know, kind of a tactical turn-based game. It's not really a shooter, but they do have guns. So in XCOM 2, the twist is the aliens have won. They have taken over humanity. They have they have asserted themselves into civilization, and now the XCOM unit is actually to the aliens and to most of the people on the planet, a terrorist organization that is kind of trying to destabilize the, you know, our new rulers, which are the aliens from the XCOM previous.
Now, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Like, Is the implication that the world has like improved in any way, or is it kind of like a scary totalitarian alien?
A little bit of both. So
Okay.
there is definitely that like big brother is watching you. There's cameras everywhere. There's literally armed guards like with machine guns and stuff. So there is that totalitarian effect, but at the same time, while you're playing the game, you kind of learn that these aliens are super hyper advanced and kind of pushed humanity even further than they were. So it's kind of this almost bittersweet situation because they took over, but they also kind of helped advance progress for humanity, even though they were technically slaves. And then they kind of later, and spoilers for the XCOM 2 story, even though that's not really like XCOM 2 is more about making it through the game rather than it is about the story. But you do find out that the aliens are working on this project, which kind of puts a timer on your game, like, so you're always pushing back against this like timer where basically they're going to eradicate humans and take their DNA and then basically move on to another planet and some other stuff like that, or just making sure that humanity is no longer a threat to this alien race. What's really cool about this is it's similar to Fire Emblem, if you've ever played that, where there's permadeath. So you'll have these units, and what's really cool about XCOM 2 and the expansion is they really beefed up like customization. So like I literally, in my current game, have all my friends as different soldiers, and they all have different classes, and I was able to dress them up and give them certain outfits, certain haircuts, different guns, blah, blah, blah. But there's a permadeath system, so unless you save scum, which, I have done in the past. If you complete a mission and one of your characters is, shot down, they don't come back. So you have to kind of keep building up this army. And I guess in a meta sense, your goal is to basically have like 2 or 3 really awesome teams of people who can real fuck shit up all the way up to the end of the game. And overall, it's super challenging. It's definitely not a game for those who are new or not very good at video games.
Sure.
There are a lot of random elements to the game. Like there's a percentage chance that you can hit an alien, and you'll get a better percentage depending on where you are. So like if you have high ground or if you have cover, that'll reduce or increase the chance of shooting or getting hit. But you can still have like a 90% chance to hit something and still miss, which in my opinion is like the bane of that game sometimes, is being like, I have a 98% chance to kill this thing. That doesn't matter because I missed.
Yep, because random number generator.
Right. So that's definitely a good one.
I remember my experience with the original XCOM classic was watching our mutual friend Joel play it.
Okay.
And he would go to the board where you could like just see the names of your different dudes. Especially because the one time I was hanging out with him, and the heavy that he assigned to me, who was like one of his better heavies, died on a mission. Oof. It was like, oh no.
That's the worst.
It was real sad. I was like, no, Joe, I missed you. Gone too soon. It seems like I feel like the intensity of it is what gives it its edge, at least from what I've been told by other people.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, and there are modes to make it even harder. Like, I think it's called Iron Man mode, which basically the game will save at certain points, and there's only one save, so you can't save scum, as people call it on the internet. So like what I do when I'm trying to like get through it, usually it's my first playthrough, is I will save right before a mission, and then I'll do the mission, and if it went well, like no one died, then I'm like, all right, cool, then I'll save. But if I don't like it and someone died, I'll just reload the last save and try to go through it again, just to, because sometimes at least early on, it's a learning experience. Sure. A lot of it is just trying to figure out like, oh, what does this rocket launcher do, or what are my limitations to, shooting an alien, or what alien abilities do the aliens have, because not all of them are the same, because like you'll have these kind of reptilian snake people, and they can grab.
Those are scary.
And they'll grab you with their long tongue and pull you towards them, which will, tactically is a terrible idea. Or they'll spit poison, and the poison basically just does dot damage, which in early games can be really rough. So
yeah, for sure.
It's definitely not that this game is not for the faint of heart, but it is definitely a fun experience. I recommend it, especially with the DLC. The DLC adds a whole nother layer. If you've played XCOM 2 and you're like, oh, what's this DLC? Definitely pick it up. It's worth a buy.
I've heard rumors that the DLC also features many next gen cast members.
Does it?
That's what I've heard.
I don't know, but mostly because I don't know the next gen.
Wait, I'm gonna look it up. Is it War of the Chosen?
Yeah.
Okay, let's look this. Everyone's favorite section of any podcast is people looking up stuff on the interwebs.
Yeah.
That's not giving me cast members. Please don't make a scary sound.
Why would there be scary sound?
Because, like, sometimes that happens. I don't know. So anyway, what are any other video games as I'm looking this up?
I mean, I won't go into too much detail because we're kind of getting to the halfway mark. But I mean, there's a ton of different Star Wars games. If you know, if you
KOTOR is a classic.
Oh yeah, for sure. Aliens.
Oh yeah.
Gosh, the man, this is gonna kill me. There was an Alien game that came out. It's a horror game where you run around. It's Alien Isolation. I'm sorry.
Whoa! I've heard that game was a spooky game.
Yeah, so you basically play as. Gosh, I'm not super familiar with Alien lore, so apologies for people who are really excited for me to talk about this game in full detail. But you play as basically a person on the space station who has to deal with a alien. And the game doesn't give you a lot of great weapons, so a lot of it's kind of sneaking around and trying to beat the AI, which the developers have kind of, went on record being like, oh, the AI is pretty good on this alien, like it's trying to hunt you out, but obviously, like, you can hide under stuff, you can, try to push it back with, various environmental help, et cetera, but, I'm sorry, the initial release date was 2014. That was 4 years ago. Well, 3 and some change, but man, this game's old, but it's really good. Definitely worth it if you like spooky games.
So, for the record, there are 5 voice actors who were also on Star Trek The Next Generation.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, for sure. They were also a lot of the people who worked on the Gargoyle television show. But that's another story for another day. All right, doop-a-doop-a-doop. All right, middle section time.
All right, yeah, we're in the middle section where we beg you to help us out here.
What's up, guys?
So if you want to talk with us, if you want to get in this conversation about aliens or any of the things we talk about in this episode,
if you want to tell me how wrong I am and tell me that aliens do in fact exist,
and they helped build the pyramids,
don't say that, because then I'll engage you in anger.
Well, either way, if you want to get in on this conversation, you can email us directly at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com.
There we go.
That's where we'll be. Yep.
So yeah, so if you want to follow us on Twitter, I'm going to get a little bit more active with that now that my life has kind of significantly calmed down. You can tweet to us at fandomr_podcast. That's sort of going to be one of our new communication tools.
Yeah, we're also on iTunes, so please, if you're following us on iTunes, please give us a review, rate us. We greatly appreciate it. We're also on SoundCloud if you want to get directly to the source. And for all updates about Fandom Roulette, you can go to our website at www.fandomroulette.com. That's where we'll be.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, shall we make a horrible boy?
Oh, we should. But first you need to take us out of the middle section.
Yeah. Boop 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 da ba 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 ba. All right. Oh man. Oh man, who is that? I don't know. It's a horrible boy. Yeah, it is. It's a horrible boy. Horrible boy. All right. Hi guys.
God.
Welcome to the horrible boy section of the podcast, or girl, but yeah.
Well, in this case, it is a girl.
Oh, sweet, cool.
So I decided in our new fun, exciting bit, a little section within the podcast, I'm going to create characters for all those people listening who like to role play but get tired of making new characters or get tired of making new NPCs. I know that happens a lot. I took Xanathar's guide and made a whole new character using the build a character tables.
Okay.
And then gave him the horrible name from a website
man.
made by probably a 10-year-old. So,
nice. I'm excited.
Yeah.
All
So
right, what's our girl's deal?
Our girl's name
Yes.
is Trinity Slaughter.
Nice.
She's a halfling.
Okay, cool.
And Trinity knew her parents and was born at home and had no siblings. So kind of pretty, modern.
Yeah, that's like
boring.
That's a normal background.
Yeah. She was raised by her father because her mother abandoned her.
Oh, that's sad.
Trinity and her father lived a poor lifestyle, but lived in a large house, which was uncommon for people in this era.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Were they like lords of the manor? Let's just say that. Or like not like they like worked in like they worked
yeah,
for
they
the lord of the
they
manor.
worked for
yeah.
a lord.
It's like Samwise Gamgee kind of situation over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trinity had a few close friends and lived a pretty ordinary childhood.
Okay, cool.
She grew up to be a guild artisan because she wanted to get away from her poor conditions at the homestead.
All right. Nice.
And I'm leaving stuff vague on purpose so you can fill in the blanks. She then became a ranger shortly after because she has seen what happens when the monsters come out of the dark.
Why not?
She took it upon herself to become the first line of defense against the evils that lie beyond civilization's borders.
Oh, man.
So that's her past.
Okay.
Currently, Trinity is 25.
Nice.
And has had 2 life-defining moments before today. She fought in a battle, but ran away in fear and to this day is still ashamed of her cowardice.
Oh, no.
And after that, she spent her time working as a guild artisan.
Okay.
And that's what we wrote about Trinity. So, for those of you looking to get a new NPC, something with a little more pizzazz, but has a terrible name from a random name generator made by me from the past, there you go.
Also, one note about Trinity, whatever her last name was, Cathedral.
Slaughter?
Trinity Slaughter, cool. She always has to be wearing, like, black, and her goal is she's always looking for the one.
Ooh, I get that
reference. That was a nice little The Matrix reference. If you remember that movie, The Matrix.
Ooh, the Matrix. And that trilogy, that great
The Matrix
trilogy.
D. He tells you where to find the best things in the Matrix. Wait a second, wasn't there a character actually named the Mater D? Or are we making that up?
I think we might be making
in the
that
sequel.
Up.
What was that guy's name?
That guy. You're gonna have to be a little more specific.
They go into his house and there's all the guns, and then Neo stops like 1,000,000 bullets because like you thought it was cool when he stopped 3 bullets. Now it's time for that movie. Those movies, man.
The first one was so good, and then I feel like it just kind of fell off the grid once they...
I think they started believing their own hype train, where it was like... Well, because it's fair. Like, it's like... It was a really cool, solid sci-fi movie, and then people started, like, finding all kinds of... It was like, oh, maybe there's some, like, religious symbolism in there, where it's like kind of like Plato's allegory of the cave, and it's also kind of like Christian mythology, because it's like the one, and the one represents, like, Jesus, and it's like the one will not know he's the one, and yada, 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 and then it's like, oh, well, now we have to make the other two just, like, about as religious allegory as we can, but anyway, we're not talking about that anymore. That's another day, another story for another day.
So now we're gonna roll right into role-playing games. So Aliens is so easy in role-playing games. Like there's a ton of different sci-fi RPGs out there. I mean, and they're all different shapes and sizes. There's the Star Wars RPG that was made by Fantasy Flight Games. I'm kind of fluid in it. I have like the 3 starting like books and all that stuff. It's the dice mechanics are really fun because rolling against you typically when you roll dice for an RPG, it's usually you roll X amount of dice and you have to get a target number. Like in Dungeons and Dragons, roll a d20, you need to beat a 15. So you have to roll a d20 and get higher than a 15 with your bonuses and whatever. Well, Star Wars does a really nice kind of system where the difficulty gives you bad dice. And so you roll what you're good at. So like say you're trying to slice a door because you're running away from an alien. I'm dying.
Man, yeah.
You could be a Wookiee.
And so you would roll like what your skill is, and it depends on how many dice it is. So like you have green and yellow, which are good dice, and so you roll those. But then the game master or star master, whatever you want to call it, will give you bad dice to match the kind of the difficulty of the situation. Maybe you're getting shot at, so he gives you a couple purple dice, or maybe a Sith is kind of rounding the corner, so he gives you a red die because things are getting really dicey. And so basically what happens is you roll all of the dice and you'll kind of mix and match. Like the good dice have like good points, and obviously the bad dice have bad points, and you match. And if you beat out the bad numbers, then you have succeeded in that task.
Okay, that makes sense.
There's also kind of on the yellow and red die, there's kind of these specialty sides. One is like kind of your light side, like critical. Like say you roll a 20 on a d20, and then there's like your crit fail on the red die. And so like what happens is, say you're slicing the door and you get a crit. Well, not only do you slice the door, but something else happens that's good for you. So maybe when you open the door, you are also able to time it so that the door shuts and won't open again. So like that's an example of like how a crit would work in that situation. And for those who are not familiar with my terminology, slicing in the Star Wars universe is just like hacking a electronic door. So they're just like hacking the door to open it because they're like all automatic and shit. However, going back to my point, if you crit fail and you get that bad die, then like the star master, game master, whatever you want to call them, gets to basically make things worse. So like, oh, the whole base is alerted to your slicing, and now there's a million stormtroopers on the way to
it's a lot of stormtroopers.
Or yeah, and it's interesting because the HP system, and like typically the way RPGs work, like if you take damage, like a person or something cuts you and does this much damage. Well, in Star Wars, that doesn't really happen a lot. Like, people don't get, like, hacked up, like, left and right. There's just, like, those critical moments where, like, Leia gets blasted by, that stormtrooper. And that's kind of how the health system works, is you have so much health, and that's kind of, like, your stamina and, like, kind of your prowess in battle. But once it hits 0, you roll on a table, and then what happens is, like, oh, that stormtrooper that hit you to 0, well, it also shot your arm, and now your ability, like, using your arm has penalties.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily die right away when you hit 0. I know a lot of games kind of either have some sort of, like, you're dying, but in Star Wars, it's very hard to just outright kill a player. You have to, like, go through, like, tons of reaching to 0 hit points before a character dies. Because in Star Wars, most of the time, except for certain movies, like, the heroes don't die. They just take damage. And
then they get, like, a robot arm, and then they're all good for the next movie.
Right, and there's plenty of those Bacta tanks everywhere to heal yourself up.
Star Wars, that's a pretty great universe.
I do enjoy that universe, but there's those books, like, if you're like, oh, that sounds amazing, I would tread carefully, because those books are very big and very long. And if you're not familiar with the Star Wars universe, a lot of this, it's a lot.
Also, are there, like, a fair number of NPCs who have, like, pretty strong plot armor, where it's like you can't kill, like, Luke Skywalker even if you really, really wanted to?
I don't know necessarily. I mean, if I wanted a plot character like that who wouldn't die, I wouldn't put them in battle with you, or I wouldn't put them in a situation where, like, they couldn't handle themselves, just because, I mean, unless you want to make a continuity plot hole, that's fine. I mean, it's your game, do what you want with it. I know there are a handful of the starter boxes, which kind of give you a set of dice, some already made character sheets. I think it's only like $20, nice. But if you're curious about the system and you got people who want to play, that is what I did with a couple of buddies of ours and my fiance, and it was a hoot. We did kind of rogues and scoundrels, and basically they had to flee from a really angry Hutt, and, stormtroopers got involved, and they had to, like, basically sneak into a dock and, like, give themselves clearance to escape. And then there was a battle at the end where they were in kind of a Millennium Falcon light vehicle.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And had to shoot down a couple of TIE fighters to escape.
That sounds like a blast.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do it soon.
Yeah, that's something that, I agree. I would like to try other systems. This would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah.
And speaking of other systems, another one you could probably do aliens with, although probably only a couple of times before it got old, was Monster Inc.
Yes.
which I actually just picked up.
Yeah, so what's Monster of the Week, Cody?
So Monster of the Week, for those who are unfamiliar, it's powered by the Apocalypse system, which is, to not get too technical, basically they have boiled down a lot of like mechanics that, like, a lot of RPGs have a lot of mechanics, lots of things to know. In this game, all you need is a character sheet and 2d6, and it's kind of more heavily focused on role playing, and kind of it's more about telling people what you're going to do and then finding out if you succeed or fail, versus like, oh, I need to look at this player's handbook and figure out what kind of action I need to take. Like, it's very trimmed down. It's very easily digestible for people who are new to RPGs, but it basically plays like an episode of Buffy or Supernatural or X-Files, where you play as one of these badass hunters, you know, whether you're Fox Mulder or Sam Winchester. You know, there's all these different kind of classes that give you abilities based on these popular monster hunter tropes, and I think this works because, you know, aliens can also be monsters, for sure. And you could kind of do you could do a whole...
You could do like an X-Files-y. Like, that was a Monster of the Week show, even though it had more of a sci-fi spin to it.
Right. So, you know, instead of, you know, monsters, they're just aliens.
Sure.
So that's another really good system. I haven't run it myself I've watched people play it, and I've been reading the book, because I literally just got it a couple days ago from the time we record this. So... from what I've gathered, this is a great, like, one shot, or, you know, maybe a couple of run-ins and stuff, but I'm not sure if it's a good system for, like, a long-term campaign yet, but, you know, we'll see. I'm gonna read on it and give a better answer in a few.
It also strikes me as, like, kind of an outsider's perspective, and hearing other people talk about it, it would be ideal for, like, a first-time game master, because there's not quite as many, like, balls to juggle.
Well, also in this book, they have a couple of really good starter kind of encounters set up for you. So, like, instead of so you don't, like, I could, in theory, grab you and a bunch of our friends over the weekend and just be like, hey, make these characters, we're gonna do a one shot and see how this goes. And basically all you need to do is read the book. It's not a long read, but yeah, it's definitely it looks a lot of fun. I will talk more about it when I get more or actual, like, play testing done.
For sure, yeah. All right, shall we move into our last section?
Absolutely, cool. Our grab bag.
Our grab bag. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, there are very few situations where, like, aliens are kind of depicted as anything other than, like, either cosmic threat or, like, idealized society that, like, we need to aspire to be. There's some notable things. So there's a couple of pretty notable, I would argue, counters to that. One of them being the hit 90s film Men in Black, starring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, which apparently, surprising everyone, was like the goddamn comedy team of the mid-90s. Like, those guys were so funny together. But yeah, so a little background. So Men in Black was originally a Marvel comic. Or if not, it was one of those deals where it was like a company that Marvel owned and distributed, so it might not necessarily be Marvel canon. But basically, the premise of it, the comic, is there is a secret organization that is called the Men in Black, who are more or less like alien hunters on Earth. And it's all the stereotypes that you ever hear about, like, government agents wearing, like, black suits and having laser guns, and they would roll in, they would capture aliens, and they were also kind of, like, you know, helping aliens come and live on Earth. So it was, and they're also a secret organization that's off the books, is denied by the government, and they have these things called neuralizers, which erase your memory.
God, I wanted one of those as
a kid. 100%. So it was the coolest thing.
I feel like everybody wanted that as a kid if they grew up in the 90s. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, and so I've heard rumors that the comics, tone-wise, are a little bit darker than the films are.
That makes sense.
But one of the things I kind of love about the films, and once again, I've not actually read any of the comics, but I just like the fact that, like, most aliens are just, like, living their lives. They're not necessarily good or bad, they're just, like, here.
Yeah, most of the aliens in at least the first two. Now, I never saw Men in Black.
Yeah, neither have I, actually.
But most of the aliens, besides, you know, the villain, quote unquote, usually it's kind of like a slice of life situation. Like, these people just live under the guise of humans, so because, you know, for whatever reason, and the Men in Black kind of facilitate and kind of make sure that things don't go awry. You know, like they seem to have a code of conduct. Like there's a scene where one of the aliens in disguise starts to show a little, like his suit or whatever starts to like fall apart, and you know they almost like, you know, prosecute him almost to a certain degree, and I think that's interesting. I like the idea that, you know, all aliens have been living among us for a long time, and there's actually a really good quote from Tommy Lee Jones in there about why people don't know about aliens because of the kind of the mass hysteria of the situation.
That's actually one of my favorite lines in that movie, and maybe in movies in general, which is, "A person is smart, but people are dumb, panicky animals, and you know it." Something like that. And all the line readings in this movie are so good. Like, one of my favorites, another one is, it's actually in the same sequence where Tommy Lee Jones is explaining to Will Smith like the whole setup of it, and he's describing, you know, it's like, you know, they're like weird people just trying to live their lives, and Will Smith goes kind of slowly like, "Cab drivers," and Tommy Lee Jones's response is, "No, not as many as you'd think." Little things like that, because like, I don't know if, have you ever been to New York?
No.
Yeah, it's like, personally, you know, as a New Yorker, or, you know, Will Smith's character is a born and bred New Yorker. I've been in New York once. I rode in a taxi cab once. And, you know, I guess if you were living that life, perhaps you would assume that maybe more taxi drivers were aliens, but no. And then the other thing, too, is obviously, like, they have fun little things where the National Enquirer is America's most honest news source. That's a fun little joke. And once again, you know, it's just kind of neat to watch this movie of aliens just kind of living their lives. The breakout character of that movie, there were two. There were those like weird worms who poured the coffee. And then the other one, and I think this is the one that's better remembered, is the little pug.
Yeah.
And the setup for that scene is so good because they're looking for this famous, you know, alien, like, you know, basically knowledge broker, and they walk up and there's this guy who, he's tall and he's gaunt and he has a weird angular face and really long white hair, and, you know, he just looks alien, and Will Smith goes, "Well, if that's an alien, that's the worst disguise I've ever seen." And the dog starts yelling at him that it's like not as easy as you think to take on a dog form. It was a nice little subversion of that trope.
Yeah.
You know, lots of jokes about how prominent aliens, or prominent celebrities rather, are aliens. Especially the sequel, like Michael Jackson has a cameo as an alien. There's a line about like Elvis Presley, "Don't you know he died? No, he went home." Things like that. But it was a really good movie, and I think it's just because the dynamic between Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith is so good in it. It was just a really solid, like, if you look at, if you take the layers of it, it's a really solid buddy comedy with sci-fi elements and a little bit of sci-fi horror, not a lot. Special marks to Vincent D'Onofrio, who's so good in this movie. He's the bug. That guy's face makes... That guy's face can do things I've never seen a human face do before in my life, and it's crazy. Like, oh, so good.
I just love that dude's
voice.
Yeah.
Well, he just brings such a...
More.
Oh, shit.
Like, oh my god, it's
wait,
so
that's just
good.
your Tolvere voice.
Oh shit, did I just spoil something for you?
Just that Vincent D'Onofrio has been playing Tolvere this whole time. The role of yeah, and you know, obviously Vincent D'Onofrio also crushed it as Kingpin on Daredevil, but this was everyone's kind of one of their earlier exposures to him. But yeah, I just think that one of the reasons it holds up so well is just the fact that it's such an interesting take on aliens in general.
Yeah, I can agree to that. I think for sci-fi anyways, a lot of it, the idea of an alien being this kind of unknown enemy that you have to conquer or defeat is very old.
For sure.
And it's nice that for the most part, besides the villain, because, you know, it's Men in Black and you kind of have to, but I like that most of the aliens are kind of, you know, almost misunderstood civilians.
They're nothing to be feared. They're nothing to be envied. They're just, you know, things trying to live their lives. And, you know, I think it's one of those deals where, if you think about it, like, in a lot of ways, think about it on the flip side, if you will, where it's like, if a human found themselves on an alien planet, right? It's not like anyone would look to us and be like, "Oh my god, they're so much cooler or better than us." It's like, no, chances are they would just kind of like treat us as weird outsiders. That's it. Like, it takes something as like the big unknowingness of like the cosmos and like other entities in the cosmos, and just kind of is almost reassuring in the sense that it's like, yeah, when push comes to shove, everyone in the universe kind of just trying to live their lives, just
kind of being mundane. I don't know. I always found that kind of comforting. Oh, and then of course there's the amazing final shot in the movie. Do you remember the final
definitely.
shot?
Yeah, it's well, I guess spoilers. Are we going to talk about this? I mean, we're talking about Orion's Belt,
for sure.
right? And like what happens after that. So, premise of the movie is there is a creature, and I forget the creature's actual name. I just call him
that's
the
actually
bug.
what he's called. Yeah.
Oh, okay, there you go. So, yeah, his goal is he's trying to find Orion's Belt, which is kind of a puzzle in itself because no one's really sure what he means. Like, why is he on Earth when he's looking for a star in the solar system? And you find out that Orion is actually the name of a cat. And on this cat is this weird, basically a galaxy that's inside this tiny little, a little charm on a cat's collar. And then it kind of, I think the expanding shot from that is it kind of like the camera slow travels through, and then it kind of shows you a galaxy, which kind of implies that Orion, the thing that's on Orion's belt is its own galaxy, and that we're all just a series of basically galaxies that are marbles or playthings to a even bigger, crazier entity that's beyond us.
So they literally put our universe into a bag of marbles, and it's kind of like that joke question that like people throw out when they're like trying to make fun of philosophy majors, where it's like, what if our whole universe is like a cell on the thumb of an infinitely greater being, and then someone could counter with, well, what if all of the cells on our thumbs are like a million universes? And it's like, it's an interesting question, and it kind of, once again, it's just kind of it's a cosmic horror comforting kind of idea that it's like, we're just a smaller part in a bigger thing, which I guess some people might look at and find very scary, but I find it kind of comforting. I don't know.
Hey, I mean, different strokes. I mean, I think it's comforting, so like I get it, but I can understand why some people might not be super thrilled about that idea.
Maybe it's taken like in separate parts. Like people would be more comfortable with the first part rather than the second part. The first part of just like every alien race is just trying to live their lives as comfortable as humanly possible, or as comfortable as insert alien race here possible.
Right.
And then the other half of that coin is the thing that might get people a little more concerned, if you will.
Okay.
Do you want to wrap this bad boy up?
Yeah.
Sure. All right. So thank you for listening to us talk about some aliens and things like that.
Yeah,
it
this
was.
super fun.
I think that aliens are a really rich vein. I'm sure we could get lots of more, because there have been aliens that have been used for horror, and aliens that have been used for high adventure, and aliens that have been used for comedy, and aliens that have been used for political allegories, this, that, the other thing.
Right.
It's a really useful tool to be kind of like whatever the author needs them to be. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. Anything you want to add, Cody? It's been a while since I edited one of these.
Happy, right? Well, everyone listening to this, happy start of 2018.
Oh, yeah.
I hope you all had a wonderful holiday. I think this is our first legit recording in 2018, and hopefully the first of a bajillion.
Yeah,
more.
happy New Year, everyone. May your 2018 be filled with nerdiness and advancement, betterment, and all that good stuff. So, signing off, I'm Joe,
and
as
I'm
always,
Cody.
stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.